Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, more turbulence in the Trump administration, more of that later on during the course of this hour. But in a very unusual move, David Davis, remember, he was the Brexit secretary up until the Chequers agreement. David Davis has sent a letter to every Conservative MP, and in it he says, if we stay on our current trajectory, we will go into the next election with the government having delivered none of the benefits of Brexit, with the country reduced to being a rule taker from Brussels and having failed to deliver on a number of promises in the manifesto and in the Lancaster House speech. This is not a technicality. It will be obvious to the electorate, and the electoral consequences could be dire. There is no need for either preposterous threats in order to justify Chequers or of losing Brexit or using Labour votes to get a discredited Chequers minus through Parliament. So it's a pretty unusual move, isn't it, for a very senior Conservative MP and former Cabinet Minister, very recently Cabinet Minister, to write to everybody to say if we stay on this current course, it is going to be dire. The electoral consequences could be dire. Is he right? Well, I'll tell you what's interesting. Over the course of the last few months, a lot of you have rung me, have texted me, tweeted me, Facebook messaged me, and you have said, if she doesn't keep her promises on Brexit, if you don't get the Brexit you thought you were going to get, you won't vote for them again. So is that what he means? I think what he means is this. He means, number one, that the consequences will be dire because a lot of people simply won't vote Conservative. I think he means the consequences will be dire because he means Jeremy Corbyn could, because of this, become the next Prime Minister. I also think what he's really saying here is there will be people in the Conservative Party who find this so completely and utterly unacceptable that there will be a split in the party and that there will be MPs and members of the House of Lords who will join UKIP or form a new political party. That I think is the ultimate threat. And perhaps that's why he's used the word dire. Is he right? I absolutely think that he is. I think Mrs May's in a very, very bad place with this. As it stands, she's almost certainly going to need Labour votes to get any deal through the House of Commons. And bear in mind, we're just a few days away from the 18th of October, which is going to be the big Brussels summit, at which some kind of withdrawal deal may well be agreed. If it is, we'll all be back in Brussels in mid-November to finalise everything, including, of course, £39 billion of your taxpayers' money. So let me ask you, you tell me, do you think David Davis is right when he warns of dire electoral consequences if the government sticks on its current path? And if you think, yep, absolutely, I couldn't vote for them again if they did this, then call 0345 6060 973. Or maybe you feel, look, I don't really care what the deal is. As long as we just leave the treaty on March the 29th next year, that's good enough for me. In which case, text to 84850 or tell me, give me your interpretation of what you think David Davis means when he uses the term dire consequences. And you can do that by tweeting using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. And, of course, you can comment on Facebook too. And a text already coming in. Andrew says, David Davis is wrong. A hard, clean Brexit will result in millions deserting the Tory party. Promising a people's vote will help win the election. Andrew, I don't know quite what you're on, but about 75% now of the Conservative vote is a leave vote. And the idea that more than a really very small number of those think that having a second referendum on this is a good idea is, I have to say, completely and utterly beyond me. Hi, Nigel. I think David Davis should see the sense in May trying to navigate the middle ground. None of the proposed deals, including no deal itself, will fly. We're heading for an election, says Jason in Epsom. Well, we may be heading for an election, Jason, but I wonder, the people's vote. So it's very interesting. A couple of constitutionalists today have said that actually the people's vote doesn't work because you can't call and hold a referendum within at least a 6-month period. It took nearly a year for David Cameron's referendum to get from being passed to actually being on the ballot. So the truth of it is that the people's vote who are campaigning for a second referendum, what they're really saying is they want Article 50 to be suspended first, followed by a referendum, but they've not. I'm not sure, actually, that Alistair Campbell's been coming clean with us on that one, but we'll get him on the show in a couple of Sundays' time, and we'll ask him. Let's go to Mark in Nebworth, a new caller to the show. Mark, you've heard David Davis's comments. I mean, is it just sour grapes from him, or does he have a point?
No, he very definitely has a point, Nigel. Pleasure to talk to you. This is carry on relentless, isn't it? It would be funny if it wasn't so serious. It's the first time that the British people have been given a vote in 40-odd years. The government threw everything they had at it. They wrote to every household. We had the IMF, we had the President of the United States telling us all how bad it was going to be. I have always been a Conservative voter. If this gets nobbled, if we get the Chequers plus or Chequers minus, I certainly wouldn't vote Conservative again. It's a betrayal of the people's wishes. It's a betrayal of democracy.
Have you stuck, Mark, with the Tory party through thick and thin?
No, I ventured once or twice with UKIP.
Right, okay. A sort of flirtation with UKIP, perhaps, is the way to describe it.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, and particularly in European elections, a lot of Conservative voters did do that.
But to be fair, Nigel, a lot of people, I would say, voted the same way that I did, which is why David Cameron actually gave us the vote, because he was too frightened that the Conservative Party would lose the election.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think increasing numbers of people voting UKIP terrified Cameron into promising the referendum. Of that, there's no doubt, and that did please a lot of voters, Mark, like you, who, in that sense, had voted strategically. So let's just be absolutely clear: if they nobble Brexit, as you put it, and we finish up half in, half out, you simply won't vote for them.
No, they're treating the public like fools, and the public aren't fools. There's a lot of information on the internet. There's a lot of information on radio shows like yours. It would be a mistake to take the British people as stupid.
I couldn't agree more. Martin, thank you very much indeed for calling us. David is calling from Southampton. David, good evening. Is David Davis on the money?
Well, I don't know whether he's on the money or not. I don't really know what our politicians in government are doing at the moment, but I certainly think it's a complete betrayal. I'm one of the few probably that's taken a bit of time to read through the Chequers plan and the detail behind it. And in terms of a wish list of getting out of the EU, it leaves a lot to be desired. It's full of compromise, the half of which I don't think any of the electorate realise. I don't think we realise the extent to which we're actually still going to be tied back into the EU come next March.
Now, David, the EU have said they won't accept Chequers, so we're not going to get Chequers, but I suspect we're going to get Chequers minus, which means it'll be even worse than Chequers. What is it? But you've looked at that plan. What was it in particular that stuck out to you as being an unacceptable compromise?
Well, I think the biggest betrayal, and the area where the whole British public are being hoodwinked at the moment, is defence policy. I think when you take a bit of time to have a look into that, I think question should be asked of, is it Mr. Gavin Williamson, MP,
yes.
Who sort of heads all that up, because we've just agreed, I think in effect, to an ever closer union in terms of defence policy going forward. And I don't think anybody is really aware of that and the extent to which we've committed to give more funding to the EU and stand by the EU in the event that there's our military is called upon.
Yeah, well, my big problem with it, David, and I don't disagree with it, by the way, my biggest problem with it is we stay with the European Union rulebook, and I think to myself, there are 5.2 million people out there running their own businesses, acting as sole traders, all of whom will be quite worried about Jeremy Corbyn and potential big increases in corporation tax, etc. But if we stay with the EU making the rules for your individual industry, where's the incentive to go and vote Conservative?
Exactly, and I think I think there's going to be a huge crash and a huge wake-up call for the Conservative Party. I think actually this will see them destroyed. I think actually if nobody
could they split, David, over it
within the party,
could they actually split over this? Could they actually split,
I think,
do you think?
it's highly likely, because if they don't do something themselves and they let things take the natural course, and, somehow this is scrambled through Parliament as a checkers minus, as you've said, the inevitable event that's going to happen is you can't imagine that where you've got 70-plus turnouts in all these electorates and all these MPs have betrayed Brexit voters, you cannot imagine that they're possibly going to get re-elected next time.
I think there's a backlash and they're underestimating it. David, I thank you. Chris says David Davis is right. The deal needs to respect David Cameron's leaflet. Otherwise, we'll never trust the Tories again. And what Chris is referring to is the 9 million quid leaflet that went through our doors that said, this is your decision, we will abide by it. Richard in Chelsea says, if the Chequers plan isn't abandoned, the voters' backlash will make the poll tax riot look like a small disagreement between two rose growers at a village flower show. Thank you for that. Amar is calling from Oxford. Good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Thanks for having me on again. Just a quick point. I just want to point out what he should have also put in the letter is he should have reminded all of the MPs what happened to the Lib Dems when they reneged on the tuition fees promise.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
Went into electoral
Yeah, because that was the 2010 election, wasn't it? And they made a big promise they would not support any increase in tuition fees from, I think I'm right in saying, £3,000, which is what the cap was at that moment in time. And then once they're in government, they accepted it going to 9,000, and support for the Liberal Democrats just disappeared.
And it's still not there, is it? It's going to take them at least another 20 years to get back where they were pre-2010.
Because Clegg had lots of young voters, and they felt like a generation betrayed. So your point is, the way those voters, young voters felt who voted Lib Dem in 2010, is how Brexit voters, and even more important than Brexit voters, people who voted Mrs May in 2017, because she made a lot of promises, didn't she?
Yes. And it's going to be a lot bigger. The backlash is going to be huge, and I think it will lead to a split.
So rather than people just staying at home, you think the party itself could physically split?
Yes. So I think there's enough Eurosceptics. It's not like it was when there was Maastricht, and there's a lot more Eurosceptic MPs on all sides of this.
I agree with you. It's very interesting, isn't it? They've managed to hold together for 200 years, but hey, who's to say they can survive this? Thank you very much indeed for your call. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It is now 6:15. Strong language from David Davis. He warns of dire consequences if the government sticks to its current trajectory on Brexit. I'm asking you whether he's right. Other Brexit news, Arlene Foster. Today, the leader of the DUP has been over in Brussels meeting that always charming Monsieur Barnier, and she said after the meeting there cannot be any customs or regulatory barriers between ourselves and the rest of the United Kingdom both ways. Well, I think we pretty much know that's where the DUP stand on this, and of course in response to it, the British government seems to be so frightened of the prospect of a hard border that it's almost prepared to keep us inside the customs union. David Davis in his letter did talk about this, and he basically said that Philip Hammond, the Chancellor, is literally the only person raising the spectre of a hard border. And he lists the Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker, who all ruled one out. There will be no hard border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. It's that simple, Davis wrote. So, what David is saying is basically a lot of people come around to the view, hey, whatever happens here, we can manage this, it won't be difficult, but there are some firm Ramonas, like the Chancellor, who are making this as difficult as they possibly can. Also interesting, the former Brexit minister, who operated under David Davis, Steve Baker, now, he said there are as many as 80 Tories at the moment ready to oppose the plan agreed by Cabinet. Now, he admits that, of course, the whips will do their worst to twist people's arms. Enoch Powell once said that the whips are a necessary part of 20th century civilization, just like the sewers, and they will do their very best. But even Baker admits they'll lose some, but he thinks, my estimate is, at least 40 colleagues are just not going to accept a half-in, half-out check Chequers deal, or indeed a backstop that leaves us in the internal market and the customs union, come what may. So increasingly, you begin to understand, folks, why Theresa May said what she said at the Tory party conference speech, why she wrote what she wrote this Sunday in The Observer. She's almost coming to the view that to get this deal, whatever deal it is, but to get this deal through the House of Commons, she's going to need Labour Party support. But that equally doesn't look good to many Tory voters. Chris says Davis is right. The deal needs to respect David Cameron's leaflet. Absolutely. Steve says, evening, Nigel. Davis is right. May should have gone with Davis' proposal. She is betraying us. Davis is right, Malcolm says. Corbyn will be the next PM, all thanks to Mrs. May. Well, I think that's one of the things that David Davis was hinting would be a dire consequence. Now, perhaps, I've had one or two texts on this, but tell me that I'm wrong. Tell me that the callers so far are wrong. Tell me that David Davis is wrong and that everything's going to be fine for Mrs. May on her current trajectory. 0345 6060 973. And Andrew in Sheffield says, evening, Nigel, does Mrs. May's 1 foot in the mouth, 1 foot out approach to Brexit mean that she wants to make it easier to rejoin at some future point? Davis is right. A lot of sceptics, Andrew, would say that staying half in, half out actually makes it very much easier to argue, look, we've tried, but we've lost influence. We are a vassal state. Best that we rejoin. I don't know. Could Mrs. May be that cynical? Really? Let's ask Martin in Glasgow what he makes of all of this. Good evening, Martin.
Yes, good evening, Nigel. Nice to speak to you again. I've never seen as much incompetence in my life coming from this government. I mean, I voted Conservative the last time because there was no other representative up here talking about Brexit, up in Glasgow, that is. And I thought to myself, well, there's the only chance. Now, in their manifesto and the Labour manifesto, they all said they would deliver Brexit as was voted for. Now, the quicker the electorate waking up to the fact that these two incompetent parties are useless, the better. I've never seen anything like this in my life. And I'll tell you what, Nigel, now, you might think this is a conspiracy theory, but I think it could be right. In 2017, she called an election. Now, what was interesting to me during that time, and I heard it in the LBC, her and her party were coming out with things, it was against their core vote. And even some of the presenters couldn't understand why the Conservatives were doing this. And they were getting at their core vote. Now, these sort of things could have been dealt with after Brexit. And what happened with the number of phone calls that was coming into LBC, people saying they'll never vote Conservative. Remember, this is 2017. I thought, aha. She's saying things, or her cohorts are saying things to not get the majority so that they can turn around and say, basically, well, we don't have a majority in Parliament, we can't follow through the big Brexit we tried to do. And that's what happened.
No, well, it's a bit conspiratorial, Martin, but I know a lot of people can't really work it all out. Let me ask you, whilst you're on, Scotland, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because Nicola Sturgeon, of course, has been giving her big conference speech today. She claims that the goal of Scottish independence is clearly in sight, and she says the government's going from disaster to disaster, which you, of course, would agree with. But she also thinks now is the time to strike out, because of Brexit, to leave the United Kingdom and become a truly independent Scotland. What chance do you assess she has of that?
Well, I'll tell you what's really unbelievable in all this. She wants to leave Britain, and she wants to go with the EU. What kind of independence is that? It's the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard in my life.
Martin, thank you so much. I've been saying this for years. I thought I was completely on my own.
No, you're not your own, Nigel. It's completely ridiculous, and they've lost the plot, basically. And I think if I was living in England, and if I was an English person, I'd be completely insulted by that. Completely insulted.
And isn't it funny? She disagrees with both the referendum in Scotland 2014 and the referendum in the UK, across the whole of the UK in 2016. I think we've gone way past the high tide mark of Scotland separating from the UK. Hey, Martin, thank you very much indeed for your call. I'm going to move on. Got lots of other callers. Mike in Bexhill is next on the line. Mike, good evening.
Nigel, good evening. How are you, fella?
I am well. So is Davis right? I mean, are they facing dire consequences?
Well, as your last caller just said, to a degree, and I'm not going to reiterate what you said, but to a degree, It's all crazy, Nigel. I'm nearly 60 years of age, and I've not experienced politics like this ever in my life. And the more we examine it like this on the radio and so on, the more we all get to know exactly what this nightmare is that we're actually leading us at the moment as a government. It's crazy. I mean,
isn't the truth of it, Mike? Isn't the truth of it, Mike? Isn't this simple, really? That we, the punters, were given the chance to express an opinion, albeit, you know, that he didn't really want to give it to us, but we expressed an opinion, and despite telling us in their general election manifestos that they would respect our vote, they don't respect our vote, and our politicians want to overturn it. Isn't that what it's really about, Mike?
Yeah, it is, absolutely. I mean, my gut feeling is, I don't really know, Nigel, of course I know, I'm a man in the street, but my gut feeling is simply this has already been decided. You know, our government, our politicians, the EU, the whole lot of them together have already decided how to play this all out. It's just how to make it as soft as it can so people like you and I and, well, all those that voted to leave this corrupt organisation to be able to see that something's been done. But we're going to be conned. We know it. We can see it coming down the track.
Ultimately, Mike, you know, if we are determined to follow the path that we took during that referendum, despite all the threats that were put upon us, we'll have our day in the end, won't we?
Well, I suppose there's one last thing to say, Nigel, just to finish it. It's quite simple. It's you, Nigel. The people, the leavers, need a united voice, and we haven't got anyone. We're attacked by the MSN every single day and night. The BBC rhetoric is just totally anti the people of the UK. How can this happen in a democracy? It's impossible,
Well,
Nigel.
I am trying, Mike. I am trying on a cross-party basis, working with Conservative, Labour and other people, and I am trying to get a bit of a campaign going. I'll be down this weekend, this Saturday. I'll be down in Torquay with Jacob Rees-Mogg and others, and I work with Labour MPs, so I am trying. Mike, thank you. Let's go to Halifax, speak to a new caller, Ian. Ian, good evening.
Hello there, Nigel, and it's a pleasure to speak to you.
Yeah, welcome to you, Ian. So, does David Davis have a point?
Absolutely. I personally have been a Labour supporter all my life up until Tony Blair. Tony Blair came in, I had to get rid. You know, Gordon Brown, and now Corbyn. What a moron.
Well, I tell you what, Ian, a lot of people think he's great, but hey, keep going.
All right. I can see political turmoil because if there's an election after we've been sold out, there are going to be so many smaller parties taking seats, yeah, that no party will have an overall majority. And
do you think, Ian? I mean, Ian, do you feel that this issue and the current trajectory the government's on, do you really feel we're coming to a moment where many, many millions of people will start voting for different parties?
Yes, absolutely. Because there's no trust in Corbyn. There's certainly no trust in the Tories who sell us out. And as far as Liberals, well, they're insignificant now, aren't they? One thing I did want to ask.
Got quickly, Ian.
All right, quickly. Right, let's just say she signs up to a deal that says that we shadow the EU regulations, yeah?
Yep.
But what happens if we totally disagree with those regulations and say, no, we're not following them?
No. We will have signed up and we will obey. We'll be a vassal state, Ian, and that's a reason to be angry.
And that is what I'm angry about. Because
all right, fine, Ian, thank you. I've got to move on. I'm trying to get as many of you in as I possibly can. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC at 6:30. Well, David Davis warns of dire consequences if the government sticks to its current Brexit course, hinting that people won't vote for the Conservative Party, Corbyn will get in, there could even be a split. And so far, many of you seem to agree. But I do wonder with Conservative voters how much they may fear Jeremy Corbyn. They might just vote Conservative even if they don't like the Brexit deal. Now, Oxford University this morning was very, very fortunate. They had Hillary Clinton visiting with her usual happy, sunbeamy, upbeat messages, and she began today by talking about Conservative MEPs voting against a motion that was put to the European Parliament to censor the Hungarian Prime Minister, Viktor Orban.
I hope the European Union and the people of Europe will resist the backsliding we're seeing in the East. It's disheartening to watch conservatives in Brussels vote to shield Viktor Orban from censure, including British Tories. They've come a long way from the party of Churchill and Thatcher.
Well, there you are. So bad Tories, slap on the wrist. But of course, she couldn't help giving us the benefit of her superior knowledge about the Brexit referendum and what went wrong.
Here in the UK, senior lawmakers like Damian Collins, a Tory, and Labour's Tom Watson have called for a full and independent investigation into Russia's role in the Brexit referendum. Collins, who has led the parliamentary inquiry, warns of a crisis in British democracy, and I quote, based on the systematic manipulation of data to support the relentless targeting of citizens, unquote.
There you are. It's the Russians what done it. The Russians manipulated Brexit because, of course, they also cost Hillary Clinton the chance to be president of the United States of America, which is why I'm convinced in 2020 she wants to be the Democrats' candidate again. Talk about delusional. Hey. And whilst we're on the subject of female politicians from the United States of America, something today that I think has surprised people somewhat, and that is that Donald Trump announced earlier on this evening that their United Nations ambassador, Nikki Haley, will leave the administration at the end of the year. The president spoke after he and Miss Haley had met in the Oval Office. He called her a very special person and said together they'd solved a lot of problems. In response, Nikki Haley said, I proudly serve in this administration. She also added, I don't agree with everything the president says. Nikki Haley, I've met Nikki Haley. She is clearly a very, very competent woman. Many have thought that she would want to run against Donald Trump for the 2020 nomination. Reason being, of course, that very rarely in America do the Democrats or the Republicans get 3 consecutive terms. And if she was to wait, assuming Trump was to win in 2020, it'd be very difficult to think of her winning it in 2024. She has said today that she will not be a candidate in 2020, and she just wants a rest from her job. I don't know the truth of that. All will be revealed, but it will, given that the midterm elections are taking place on November the 6th, this will get portrayed in much of the American media as yet more turmoil in the Trump administration. Whether it is or whether she really just wants a break after 2 years of doing this, and previously she was the governor of South Carolina, I just don't know. Back to David Davis and indeed Theresa May, and Peter, who clearly feels very aerated over this, says Treason May went into the 2017 election with a 20-point lead and almost managed to lose it. Says it all. She is useless and hemorrhaging support. Now, Elizabeth raises a really good point. Evening, Nigel. Why is Oliver Robbins over there on his own? Thought Raab was in charge of Brexit. He seems to be just carrying the bags. Well, what Elizabeth is referring to is Ollie Robbins, that senior civil servant who, of course, was the author of the white paper that we now know as the Chequers deal, as opposed to the David Davis one, which got binned. Ollie Robbins is in Brussels today, been seen in a bar in Brussels today. So he's over there. The Brexit secretary is not over there. And it does increasingly feel that Mrs May simply relies on our civil service to negotiate with their civil service, with not too much input from what the voters actually wanted. Leslie says she is furious with Mrs May. But, and this is interesting, I could not withhold my vote for the Tories to allow Corbyn in. And Leslie, I think there of course will be a lot of people like you who will go out and vote Conservative come what may, because you don't want to let Labour in, just as there are Labour voters who will vote for Corbyn, even though they don't like him, to stop the Tories getting in. And that's what you get in a first-past-the-post electoral system. The question, Leslie, is just how many people will either stay at home and think, do you know what, I simply can't, I run a small business. What use is this to me if the rules are still being made somewhere else? Or if there was a split, or if they all joined UKIP or whatever it was, they took their vote elsewhere. The question is just how many. Davis says it could be dire. I'm asking you folks whether you think it is right. I'm going to go to a new caller in Farnborough, Hampshire, called Neil. Good evening, Neil.
Hi there. Yeah, this is actually the second time in a long while that David Davis has actually been right about something. So he's right that this is going to destroy the Tory party, because the consequences are dire for the Tories, but it's dire for the country in terms of if we end up leaving with no deal, it's going to be pretty bad for the economy, etc. So I think it's pretty bad. And the other time he was actually right about something was when he said that a democracy has in order to be a true democracy, you should be able to change your mind. And if you can't change your mind, then you're not a real democracy. So I think in the spirit of that, we really should all join the People's Vote March on the 20th of October and get out there.
Neil, what he meant was... No, quite right. No, he said we should in a democracy have the chance to change our mind, which is why after 42 years it was perfectly reasonable that we should have another vote on our relationship with the European project. And I honestly, if you want another vote on this in 20 years' time, I haven't got a problem at all. But if you want to have another vote on this before we've even got Brexit, I think you're being anti-democratic.
Well, I think it's about making changes as you see things start to go wrong. So, in your point, you thought it started to go wrong from the previous vote, and so in which case maybe we should have had an election earlier. But then if the consequence to actually leave is actually this is going to be even worse, then we should be able to change our mind.
How do you know? How do you know? We haven't left yet. I mean, how do you know we're not going to see, when we've left, massive foreign direct investment, the whole world queuing up to do trade deals with us, a massive boost in national self-confidence? And you don't know that, do you?
Well, how do you get massive foreign investment when you've essentially slapped on extra money on anything we export? So anything we do, so all of our exports is really going to be affected by this. We've already seen
Neil, you seem to be missing something. Europe is a very small part of the world.
Europe is actually quite big, but
7% of the world's population and 15% of global GDP. It's not that big, Neil. It may be important to us as a trading neighbour, but anyway, Neil, I'm going to let you go because we will discuss the people's vote between now and that rally you're going to have on the 20th of March. I saw the adverts online yesterday for free coaches from all over the country. Kush is calling from Watford. Hi, Kush. How are you?
Hi, Nigel. For once, I'm actually going to start to agree with you. I can't believe it. Someone's come over me today.
Oh, dear. You would have to sit down. I mean, you could be having a hot flush or something. You know?
Could be. Who knows? So I do agree that David Davis could be right to what Theresa May is saying is starting to polarise the Conservative Party. But for me, that's not a problem. See, I'm a Labour voter primarily. And I think that they have some great policies that I want to put in. I think a second referendum would be a great chance to see where we think we could go going forward. Because I think it was a miss.
And what would tell me what would the? I mean, even if we did, and let's be reasonable and say we have it again in a long time after we've left. Short term, of course, we can't have a referendum between now and March the 29th. There simply isn't time. Yeah. So the only way this happens is if there is a suspension. But even if this did happen, which I think would be awful, I think a second referendum would really break down trust. But say we did, and you got your way, what would the question be?
Right. So I'd have three options. Right, on there.
Oh, no, you can't do that. You can't. Now, the Electoral Commission won't allow that. The Electoral Commission have said that a referendum question has to be a straightforward choice. They've said that already. So if it's a straight choice, what would your question be?
Okay, so either we go for the deal that we've now negotiated, okay, right, or do we go back to the European Union? That would be my simple question. Because
surely the simple question is,
just let me finish, sorry. We want to see what we're getting out of this deal. That's not what we were given a binary decision, okay, at the referendum. Yes or no?
Exactly.
Do you want to stay or do you want to leave? We have no idea of the ramifications of what the effect would have.
Kush, I want to leave. I want to leave, Kush. I was told we'd be poor. I was told millions would be unemployed. I was almost told that plagues are black locusts. Almost told that plagues are black locusts. No, well, it could be a very, very sunny, bright future outside. You don't know economically what's going to happen any more than I do. Well, I tell you what we do, Kush. I'll do you a deal. Once we've left, let's look at it then and think about whether it would be appropriate to vote again. I've got to go because... All right, we'll do that. All right. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here at LBC. It's 6:45. I wonder, because as David Davis talks about dire consequences of the government sticking to this plan, advocates a Canada plus deal, which, as he says, many people in the rest of the European Union now say they want, says the Irish border issue's basically been solved, apart from the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Ramona in chief. Do you think David Davis is actually saying, look, Boris has had a go at the leadership bid, hasn't quite managed to pull it off. Do you think David Davis is saying, I'm the person to lead this country through Brexit? I wonder, is this, in a way, David Davis saying, this party's headed for catastrophe, I'm the one that can save it? Be interested to get your opinions on that. And Richard says the real Conservatives in the party never had the guts to kick May out. The country will suffer as a result. The sellout will lead to a Corbyn government, says William. It's the last chance saloon. Simon in Sudbury, in Suffolk, is a new caller to the show. Is it the last chance saloon for the Tories, Simon?
Yeah, it is. I am absolutely livid. I was listening to your radio. If that woman gets Chequers through and sells us down the river, I have always voted Conservative. Always.
Yep.
My next vote will be Corbyn, and it is nothing that man has got that I agree with, but I will vote him in. I'm livid.
Why would you... I mean, Simon, I get the fact you're livid, and so you've literally always voted Conservative, yeah?
Always.
And you turn out, and fine. But why on earth, if you'd always voted Conservative... I mean, would you vote Corbyn just to punish them for betraying your trust?
Yes, I would. Yeah, I would.
Would you?
Yeah, because if she's selling us down the river, so be it.
But what if... all right, Simon, but...
will be my last vote. I will never, ever vote again.
Simon, let me ask you something. If Corbyn, I mean, Corbyn made promises on Brexit as well. You know, he said publicly in 17, of course we're going to leave the single market, etc. I mean, if Corbyn was to effectively take the Labour Party into that position, would you still vote for him?
I would vote if she doesn't get. All I'm saying is, if she doesn't get, if she doesn't get the vote that the people ask for, then that is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I Simon cannot stand the two-facedness of it all.
Simon, you're living
and then do another.
You're living out there in East Anglia. You're a long way outside the London bubble. Do you think other? You drive in, okay? But do you think other people living out there will feel the same as you?
Probably not. I don't know. I really don't know. You know, me and my wife have both said the same. You know.
No, well, that's two of you.
Cut me in half, it'll say Conservative through. But I honestly, the way they've conducted themselves have just made us look a fool in front of the whole Europe.
Simon, thank you. Thank you for giving us that comment. I think, I have to say, I don't know how many Simons and his wife are out there, but I bet there's quite a few. And he's someone who's stuck with the Conservative Party since Mrs. Thatcher, through thick and thin. He'd even vote Corbyn if they betray him. Let's, here we are. Ian says, better a vassal state than a failed state, Nigel. It was only a failed state if we make it a failed state. An independent state could be a great success for this country, and I don't want to be a vassal state. I mean, vassal states are those that have been defeated in war. Surely we're a little bit better than that, Mrs. May, aren't we? Thomas is calling from Worthing. Thomas, good evening.
Good evening. I'm still recovering from that Hillary Clinton recording earlier. A bit confused, I've got to say. I thought, according to Chuka Amuna, Brexit voters were predominantly old and sick people that couldn't send emails. And yet she thinks that Russia
that's right.
people's vote.
Yeah, all these people on their Zimmer frames that voted Brexit, but actually they're switched
how to use computers, but apparently got swayed online by Russia.
I know.
Anyway.
But isn't it, whenever you listen to Hillary, isn't it? I mean, they used to say that Ted Heath, had given the longest sulk in political history, but, I mean, Hillary's having a fair go. It's this constant, it's not fair. It's pretty awful to listen to, I have to say. Thomas, does David Davis have a point?
Yeah, he's absolutely spot on, but I think the biggest risk at the next general election will be voter apathy. I think people will vote with their feet and not actually bother turning out. So, I mean, I can't vote for the Conservative Party as a disabled person, especially as a Brexiteer, because their position is completely wobbly. The Labour Party position is whatever Keir Starmer decides it to be. The Liberal Democrats are obviously anti-Brexit. I can't support UKIP because they're just they're coming across as a political wing of the EDL at the moment, and I really wish you would take back control of the party before it's completely destroyed. I've just recently joined the Social Democratic Party, and I've done that out of principle because I can't vote for anybody else.
I don't even know who they are, Thomas, but fine. There are lots of parties out there. There are lots of parties out there.
Liberal-minded Brexiteers.
I mean, there are, you know, there are dozens of political parties that get set up, but very, very few ever get into a very, very strong position. Thomas, it's a very interesting phone call. You know, Carrie asks me here by text, I voted Leave for the first time ever. I feel homeless. Who do I vote for? So, yeah, there are lots of people, Thomas, out there feeling like that. Do you think David Davis, I mean, you obviously follow this stuff, do you think David Davis is actually saying to people, look, here's my CV, I could do this? Thomas, I've lost Thomas. That's a shame. I was looking forward to that. Never mind. Let's go to Dublin and speak to Mark, a new caller to the show. Hi, Mark.
Hello, Nigel. Following on from what you just said, I am 100% behind David Davis. I don't even care if you get Thomas the Tank Engine to deliver it. You just need to get someone who's 100% behind it. If his CV says, I'm going to bring him on, make him Prime Minister. I am 100% behind it.
Well, the point is that she was a Remainer, wasn't she? She pretended to the electorate, you know, at a general election and with the Lancaster House speech that suddenly she was one of us. Clearly, she absolutely isn't. Do you think David Davis would make a good leader?
I think he's obviously positive, he's pro-Brexit. As I said, I'm not really that fussed. It's just someone who's 100%.
Thomas the Tank Engine, David Davis, let's get a leader that believes in Brexit. Mark, I thank you. I've got time for one last quick caller. I'm going to Twickenham to speak to Mark, another new caller to this show. Welcome, Mark.
Hi, Nigel. Yeah, I do agree with David Davis that it would be catastrophic for the Conservative Party, and I would like to see him as leader, but I don't think that was necessarily his pitch. But the catastrophe is what this has all been about, is to for them to remain in Europe without splitting the Tory party, because there's always been a wing of the Tory party who wanted to be out. And
yes.
the reason why the referendum was called was to try and get a majority of the British people to vote in favour of staying in. And then Cameron would have been able to say to the Brexiteers in his party, oh, it's democracy. Yeah. You can't split the party in the country and all that kind of thing. But it all went wrong when he lost it unexpectedly. They were trying to neutralise the threat from you, because and what the threat that Davis is talking about is, if they go back on their word and renege now, seat by seat throughout the country at the next election, there will be tactical voting, and people who wanted to be out will vote out MPs who stood against them, who wanted to remain in.
Yeah,
and that coming.
Yeah, no, they're headed for a disaster. Catastrophe is right. Dire consequences. Mark in Twickenham absolutely agrees. John says, after Davis's letter, I can see May, Hammond and Robbins being given the push at the same time. Then the Conservative Party will become Conservative at last. John, if anyone's got the guts to actually do it, and Senior Skeptic on Twitter says to me, I voted in every election I was able to in the last 40 years. If we get a bad Brexit, I won't be able to vote ever again. And there are lots of people. This is a matter of trust. We voted to leave. I know some people don't like that, but most of the country says, let's just get on with it and deliver what people wanted. Clearly the Prime Minister isn't one of those. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show. I'm back tomorrow night at 6. At 10 tonight it's Tom Swarbrick, but up next, it's Ian Dale.
Nigel, thank you very much. Thank you very much.